Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. As Evan said, thank you for joining us in the far reaches of the convention center late in the day. First time Adobe speaker here, so hopefully not last time, and this all goes well, but bear with us. My name is Wes Vanden Heuvel. I work for Novo Nordisk. I lead the omnichannel practice there. I am honored and humbled to have Evan join me on stage today to talk about our Adobe real-time CDP journey. And it's been quite a journey along the way. I've been at Novo Nordisk about 17 years. I've held positions in market access, in brand marketing, and I've spent the last 6 years in our omnichannel practice. So Novo turns 100 this year, if you did not know, and we have a little joke at the office. We are the largest 100-year-old pharmaceutical company that no one's ever heard of. So if you thought you were coming to a Novartis presentation, I'm sorry to disappoint you. We are Novo Nordisk. But we are very proud of our 100-year heritage. If you didn't know, and you probably didn't, Novo Nordisk is actually a company that was founded on an act of love. So August Crow was a physician in Denmark in the 1920s, married to a woman named Marie who had type 1 diabetes. And when insulin, the ability to reproduce insulin was discovered in Canada by Dr. Banting in 1921, August and Marie came over to North America, met with the doctors, and brought insulin back to Denmark and began producing it, and one of the first producers of insulin, in order to provide a life-saving medication not only to Marie, his wife, but to people with type 1 diabetes throughout Denmark, which at that time was basically a life-ending disease without the proper treatment. So that idea of love, that idea of patient centricity, and quite frankly, that idea of innovation is something that's been the backbone of Novo Nordisk for the last 100 years, and something that we're very proud of. That is inclusive of our recent journey in implementing the Adobe CDP into our stack and how we can bring that to market for our customers. And over the next hour or so, we'll definitely leave time for questions. We're going to talk about the benefits and real business results seen since using the real-time CDP, how Novo Nordisk created next-level customer experiences, and how to think about a CDP in your own tech stack. And we have definitely some real-world results from what we've done so far, and excited to answer any questions that you may have. Now, as I stated, Novo Nordisk's mission is really around defeating diabetes, but also obesity and rare disease. And that's something that we take very seriously. And my role in that ambition in leading the omnichannel practice is to leverage technology to create experiences for our customers that allow them to partner with Novo, learn about our products, and ideally utilize them from HCPs to patients, and patients embrace them for how they treat their disease. And so that's an incredibly important part about what I do, and it's a big task, quite frankly, because as we all know, leveraging tools like this, trying to implement an omnichannel framework is what pretty much everyone is trying to do, but it's also incredibly difficult. And my job is to make it look as simple and seamless as possible to our customers, knowing that it's incredibly complicated to orchestrate that in the back end. But that is my function, and what I'm trying to accomplish with my team, and to deliver those customer experience for Novo Nordisk and drive us into the next 100 years. And at the office, I have a tendency to say, and there are some Novo people here, so I apologize for saying this for the 17th time for you, but I look at it as like the technology has caught up with the strategy. And what I mean by that is, as a marketer at heart, the idea of getting to a one-to-one relationship with our customers has always been what we wanted to do. And over the evolution of marketing, the ability to do that has continued to evolve. And I think we are at a point now, we are not at the finish line, but with some of the technology that has recently become available, we are as close as we've been to delivering on that one-to-one solution in marketing for our customers. And Novo Nordisk is rarely likes to be first, but we hate being last. And we've been leveraging some of this technology over the last couple of years to evolve to meet this moment, to be there for our customers and deliver on that promise of that one-to-one marketing. And as Evan and I discussed this presentation in preparation for Adobe, Evan kind of recommended, based on what I was talking about, our journey is leveraging kind of this innovation curve that I'm assuming all or most of you have seen before in some format, and kind of how the conversation went, and a little bit of a history lesson on me. I started in marketing right around the time of the dot-com crash. So in college, I was just like, oh, wow, billiards tables in the office, margarita Mondays, salaries up the wazoo. This is going to be fun. I can't wait to join the workforce. And I get up to New York, and everything comes crashing down. And it did largely because people embraced a new technology, a new ability, but didn't think through what are the unmet needs of the customers to leverage this technology. What are we going to do with it? What are we solving by leveraging this technology? And so it fell apart. But some, an important some, looked at the mistakes that were made, thought about how it could be leveraged to meet unmet customer needs, and now how we buy products, how we travel, and quite frankly, how we communicate as individuals has completely changed as a result of that. And we got to that good place. You know, if you were in marketing about 8 years ago, you probably couldn't sit through an agency pitch where they weren't talking about augmented reality and QR codes, right? That's all I heard. Got to use it. It's amazing. Got to use it. So, but unless you were Pokemon Go, didn't really matter for our business because it didn't really get embraced by the customer because what were we really solving for? We were just kind of leveraging a technology. Then a few years ago, nobody wanted to touch anything anymore, and QR codes are all over the place because they solved a need. And now we see them everywhere. They're on our badges. They're everywhere we go. I actually saw a car in the parking lot of a food store with a giant QR code sticker selling Girl Scout cookies off her minivan. Talk about great advertising, but like, wow, like they truly are everywhere. They have crossed over into now they mean something to us. And where I'm going with this is that that's how I look at omnichannel at Novo Nordisk and how we're embracing that technology. Omnichannel, I think, has become a buzzword. I think we're in that middle of it where it's like omnichannel. Are you doing omnichannel? You got to do omnichannel. That's an omnichannel tactic. That's all I heard. And I would tell my internal stakeholders, we are striving for omnichannel. We are not there yet. In many ways, we are multi-channel, but we are building towards omnichannel. And we're coming out of that and being able to leverage the technology that's become available to start embracing that and to start looking through where it was and where it needs to get to. Too many people, at least at Novo, I think, look at omnichannel like, well, that's digital. That's what we're calling digital now. And so I have to work with our stakeholders and, the more, for those of you in pharma now, the field force is a channel of omnichannel. What we do in digital are channels with an omnichannel, and orchestrating content across all those channels is delivering on the omnichannel vision, that framework of omnichannel. Like I hate it when people say, oh, is that an omnichannel tactic? I'm like, no, it's a display ad. It's part and should be driving towards an omnichannel framework and philosophy that'll deliver on that customer experience. And that's where we're starting to go. Luckily with ChatGPT, that's been the shiny penny my ET has been chasing for the last couple of weeks, so they're leaving me alone, and we'll see how that works out, on this curve, because I have a feeling it's going to be a little similar. Now it's sexy, it's fun, like let's, paint a picture of a cat who's in the style of Picasso, whatever it is, and that's fun. But eventually, and quite frankly, even now a little bit, we're finding like, all right, how do we really leverage this into what we're doing? And hopefully next year or not too distant future, we're up here talking about how we've built that into a much more productive area of how we do our business. So as I said, we're 100 years old and we're already looking towards our next 100 years, and we want to continue to innovate. That's a big part of why we're here and what we're focusing on in this presentation is how Novo Nordisk has embraced the technology from Adobe, how we've partnered with Merkle to help deliver and integrate into our technology stack, and what we need to do to continue that innovation. And it really, for me, this is my mission to deliver on that. These are the three key things that I have to get right, that my team has to get right in order for this to be successful. And one, which is actually the vision of omnichannel. When I walk the halls, if someone's like, what are you trying to do in omnichannel? I say, I'm trying to create customer experiences that matter. And when they ask me, what does that mean? It means delivering the content that my customers are looking for in the way they want to consume it, where they want to consume it, et cetera, that it's relevant to them, that they got something out of it, and I didn't just do a reach and frequency model and hope that it stuck and made it for the best. And that's really, the core of what we do. And the second one becomes kind of that, all right, how do we do it? And the presentation before this, and I'm willing to bet presentations throughout this summit, have talked a lot about personalization. And being there in that right moment, at that right time, with the right content. And this is a big topic at Novo Nordisk now because, again, as we're getting more attention from where we were, the needs of what we do are greater in the organization because of the decreasing access to our HCPs, the comfort that our patients and our doctors have going online and leveraging digital tools is that much more important. But there are some people who think personalization is that my email starts with, "Good morning, Dr. Vanden Heuvel." And I'm like, that's not it. That's important, but that's not what we mean when we say personalization. So there's a lot of internal selling and educating I have to do to get this second bucket right, to get people to understand how important this is. Because the reality is, and I say this a lot, at the office as well, while we have competitors, we're really competing with people who get this right. The Walt Disneys of the world, the Amex of the world, the Four Seasons. Customers are expecting us to get this right because they're getting it elsewhere. And if we do not, and there's a ton of data that supports this, if they are not getting a personalized experience, they will go somewhere else. And the numbers are 70% and higher of people saying, if I'm not getting a personalized experience, I will go somewhere else. And that's critical, and it's a big part of what I try and educate on and inspire my team with, that we have to get this right. We have to leverage the technology available, and we have to look at it constantly, which leads us to bucket number 3, and gaining a better understanding of the engagement, amplifying that innovation, et cetera. So getting 1 and 2 right are critical. Getting 3 right is how we scale and move beyond that. And looking at the data, looking at what's working, what could be better, because I'm a firm believer in, especially leveraging a CDP, the better you make that engagement, the better data is going to go into your engine that's going to create an even better next experience. It's going to deliver an even more fine-tuned, relevant message in that net experience. And the goal being that you achieve a flywheel-like approach that as each experience gets better and feeds better data into your engines, that you're churning out better next best recommendation, next best suggestion, whether it's to the field, whether it's to your website, to an email, however you're communicating with your customers, you are getting to that point, because then you start to scale. And then you get to go into white space and other areas that your reps can't even reach, because you're getting so smart and sophisticated about how you deliver content and identifying those micro segments that will respond to the content you're putting out there, and getting better and better and better. And that's really the 3 key areas that we focus on to get right, and how we leverage the technology. So how do we get here? The current state was not enough. Recognizing that these are the needs of our organization to be successful. Recognizing that to be successful in the next 100 years, that we have to get this stuff right. We looked at, we were heavily dependent on custom data processes. It was just slowing us down. Their data extractions took too long. And if you can't act in real time, if you can't turn that data around to be there for that next engagement, you're going to lose. And there's just no doubt about that. The fragility of the data, the data has to be right. You have to have confidence in the data to making sure you're executing off it correctly. The platform could be smarter, that's always going to be the case. And then, the siloed execution. That's why I say, in many ways, we're still executing in a multi-channel way, with pockets of that getting more and more orchestrated within a channel, within a set of channels, and continuing to grow beyond that. But the important thing, this takeaway, and I'm going to hand it over to Evan soon to talk about where we went, is that all these things that were not enough were also not that old in our tech stack and how we did things. It wasn't like these, hey, we've been doing this for the last 12 years and now it's time for a change. This was the last 5-6 years and even updating and optimizing and realizing, okay, things have taken a jump again. And that curve is coming up and we're finding new areas of productivity. We got to be there with it to solve for some of the problems that was not enough. Because again, we have to get it right because our customers expect it.
Hi, I'm Evan from Merkle. And so then when we look at how are we going to solve these kinds of problems, well, I think you guys know what solution we chose. It was Adobe. And the reason is looking at that heavy dependence on the custom process, on the need to have a stability, the need to have connection across channels, and to break down the silos that were to some extent a symptom of some of those challenges. We look towards a connected platform in Adobe through the real-time CDP that's going to give us that power of a product, frankly, managed by people who are focused on managing that product and driving product innovation, maintenance, and reliability, while also allowing us, the marketers, really to connect that into the broader ecosystem. Because just as Wes has said, it's really about omni-channel execution. And the stuff that we create needs to enable us to do that effectively. And so this gave us that power. And it was really about how are we going to harness that power and make the most of it. And so we needed to shift into building this new people-based infrastructure that was going to enable them for the next 100 years. And Wes, I love that you said that this company was born out of an act of love, because I still see that in the culture that you have today and the way that we focused on the use cases here. And so we wanted to build a foundation that was going to help for that future growth. It needed to support the mix of customer relationships that Novo Nordisk has, from those that feel like B2B to those that feel like B2C, and of course the B2B2C. And so there's a lot of complexity there to manage and to build from. And so what we enabled, and this is a very detailed diagram of what the structure, no, I mean, obviously it's not, right? So we pulled together, how do we relate to each of these segments together with identity at the core, individual identity at the core. And then that enables us then to build upon that with smart segmentation that enables the marketing that we need to create. And that's coming into the system through the interactions. And then we're pulling those together to build insights. And so the omni-channel experiences are enabled by this experience hub. I'm taking a breath because I realized I was talking really fast. So we wanted to start with a minimum lovable product. And there are a number of ways to go about that. And like I said before, I could see the way that the focus on customer centricity shows through in the company culture. Because the way that we went about this was to focus on, well, where is the greatest value going to come from? And that's going to come from enabling the important interactions that we have with our key customers and making those easier, automated, and again, in the interest and point of view of, in this case, HCPs. And so then once we understand, like, what's the value of this thing, what are we going to create, what are the experiences that are going to move the needle, then we look at, how are we going to enable those? And we bring the requirements from that source. And so we looked at the source systems that were, one, most important to the business, and two, most important to executing those experiences. And then we looked at what are the key destinations that we need to enable. And let's focus on those. That becomes our minimum lovable product. And then we executed 3 use cases. The first one, a highly relevant cross-sell. And this is a use case where we're supporting HCPs and their need to get samples, and making sure that those samples are as relevant as possible based on the most recent information we have about them. And that's a mix of their self-identified information and what they're putting into forms, as well as what we can predict from the behavioral data on the website. Another takes that even further and looks into, well, how can we be really smart and clear about their experience across multiple brands? And so we want to be able to enable them to get access to those samples depending on their specialty. And so we're using a bit more segmentation information about those HCPs to then create a content hierarchy around how we enable them to get access to those samples, which we know are driving those actions that are most important to our organization. And then lastly, we're looking at what we put into place was a use case around enabling the rep channel, which is a critical channel, obviously, in this category. And so we're using the CDP here to enable the reps to tell a continuous and continuous story with the HCPs that they engage in. That's going to enable them to keep the conversation moving along and drive the right kind of messages to those HCPs at the right times, rather than, let's just say, leaving it up to chance of those reps to be able to do it themselves. And we're doing that directly through the content supply chain into the IVR. And we learned a lot along the way. You know what? Oh, I got to go back. I got to talk about this. There's something really, really cool that gets unlocked once we start using this ecosystem to do stuff like this. Because certainly, like what I just described, like, do you really need RT-CDP to do that? Well, to do it as fast, yeah. To connect those identities across different channel touch points, yeah, that really does. It really does help, although, like, if you built enough stuff, you probably could do it. But another thing that this is doing, and really when I say that the infrastructure needed to be people-based, is that these are aware of each other. Each one of these 3 use cases is connected to the other. And for example, as we understand what are the specialties of this HCP and what are the samples that they need to engage with, we're also suppressing the other samples and the other reminders so that they're not getting distracted, and every interaction they have with us is the most relevant interaction. And so the intelligence isn't just in how we trigger these interactions or how we connect the identity across channels. It's also about how the experiences themselves play off of each other to create an even more personal, layered experience between the HCP and the master brand. And that's going to be extended across the, the molecules that HCP is working with through us. And we learned some things along the way. And this is what I want to share with you guys right now. So we have 3 lessons, 3 things we learned that we want to share with you. The first is how much to bite off. Now, I just showed you 3 use cases. We didn't start with the intention to do just 3. I think actually we wanted to do something like 10. We started off with very big ideas and very idealistic intentions, and that's great. But one of the things that had to be brought into the process is looking at, well, let's try to be outcome-centric here. And let's make sure that what we're building can be done. And that brings me to lesson 2, which is where to focus. And the answer to that is really 2 parts. And you saw it reflected in the use cases that were put into place. The first is focusing on the outcomes that matter. And in this case, we're looking at HCP experiences that are driving those primary KPIs that are going to lead to more patients getting access to the medicine that they need through the samples that are getting in those HCP hands at the right times. And the other is to focus on the channels and the interactions that we have control over and that we can manage the most. And then lastly, our last lesson here, wow, we are moving really fast. Our last lesson here, data reconciliation and experience alignment. And really this is 2 parts. When we're putting into place omni-channel experiences, we're also working across many aspects of the organization, multiple agencies, each one of them and partners, each one of them with their own focus, with their own needs and expectations, and who are thinking about a specific part of that experience. And so we need to bring all of these parties together under one banner, set clear expectations, identify the RACI, and manage and really be incredibly transparent. And let me tell you, that's not easy to do right away. And it does take effort and it does take time to break through some of those barriers to create a cohesive working team. And then there's a really functional aspect to that. And that functional aspect are things like, well, we all kind of calculate our segments a little bit differently. We have slightly different taxonomies for this and for that. And so we needed to bring those things together to flatten them and create a unified point of view so that we could reconcile on a single data model.
And Evan, if I can just kind of add a little bit to that from kind of the business owner side of it, and ideally there are some business owners in here that, when we talk about how much to bite off, right? So it was a lot of sessions with key stakeholders on getting approval to even move forward. But once they understood what a CDP was and what it could do, you're going to get a lot of excitement. And especially if you're talking to marketing stakeholders that we could do this. And they're like, yes, how quickly, how many brands, and let's go. And we knew from experience, and I doubt we're alone in this, all right, that's great. We're glad you're excited. Well, let's start with the ones that are easiest to execute. The ones that are likely to have the best business impact. And for my pharma colleagues in the room, obviously samples are a key indicator of a potential new-to-brand prescription and continued sales. So we started there to prove it out, make sure we knew what we were doing, and then continue to expand from there. And we started with the HCP side of the business. As Adobe continued to work on their product to make it compliant for the patient side, let's keep getting it right. Let's get some data, let's expand on it, and let's work with our stakeholders, because it's also a change for the marketers in the building, right? Now you're developing content a little bit differently. How you're deploying it is a little bit differently. As Evan said, the orchestration of that to make sure it's not, doubling down on something that was already going out, and this is now more real time, et cetera. So that, how much to bite off at once, how to ease into it, where to focus is important, and that experience alignment, with the other stakeholders in the building. I would love, well, don't tell my brand colleagues this, but I would love to have complete control of how we orchestrate content, to our customers. Just give me the content, we'll take it from here. but they have a segmentation. They have a way of how they do it. So it is a lot of alignment in how we move forward, and those were critical things. But there is just one more thing, that I think it's important to note. Compliance and privacy. Between California, Utah, Connecticut, Virginia, there's new laws coming. They don't know what they mean. They certainly weren't thinking about pharma when they came up with them. I won't say what I'm pretty sure they were thinking about. But we have to be compliant, and we have to respect them. And arguably, we have to do it at a national level, right? These laws are going to continue to pop up in different states. Eventually, there will likely be a federal law. Let's hope it doesn't go as far as GDPR over in Europe. But we have to be mindful of it. And quite frankly, we're at a point that anything that we want to do for omnichannel includes the phrase, did anyone talk to privacy? Because if you didn't, you better. Because, a lot of this, especially as we embark on the patient side of this implementation, which is just a few weeks away, every use case that we come up with now has to be vetted. All right, how are you getting this data? How is it being used? What is this an automated decision? Well, sort of, but like a human came up with the business rule, so does that navigate it? We hope so. How are you using data? Is this profiling? Is it targeting? These are things you have to be aware of now, and you have to build it into your timeline, and you have to build it into every future use case, because it can slow you down considerably, and that's why, and it's not a punchline, it's just a fact, have you talked to privacy? And it's something that I can't stress enough, and it's been a big part of the last year, and certainly on the patient side, as we go down that, we know it's going to be a lot more because of the new laws that came into effect in January in several other states and what that means. And honestly, even our privacy folks trying to interpret what that means for what we do and how we do it, because the strictest interpretation means all right, so we can't even create a call plan list anymore because that's profiling. Do they need to opt in for a sales rep to call on them? Do they need to, they're opted into our marketing stream, but this is using a level of automation. So those are conversations you're going to have, and things you're going to have to build into your timelines, depending how sophisticated and malleable your privacy office is.
And so you're probably thinking at this point, what's the answer? What's the answer? C, all of the above. And so, how do we address this? There's a couple of really useful mindsets to employ to help solve this problem within your organization. The first is to not necessarily look to RTCDP as the source and answer to the entire solution of privacy. It exists in a continuum of data and contact. And so actually what we need to be doing, not necessarily interrogating, will this platform meet all the needs, but rather how is the system that I am developing going to operate, and will that system meet those compliance requirements? Something a little bit more functional, there are some features within AEP that allow you to do things like setting up certain privacy rules, enabling you to do the opt-outs that you're going to need, and you definitely want to take advantage of those features. The other thing that we were able to do, we needed to do, was set up several environments and partitions in order to keep those things sacred, so to speak. And so you do have some of those tools to manage the needs that you have. However, you're not going to be able to solve all the problems within the AEP platform. And so with that great news, we did see some really awesome results. In the first 6 weeks, we saw 300 incremental attributable conversions from these campaigns. And that's a fantastic new baseline. We also saw an increase in the click-to-open rate. An increase that is so unbelievable that I cannot put it on a slide in front of you. And I think, Wes, you described it as really setting a new benchmark.
Yeah, so as Evan and I were kind of talking about the data, and the reason we wouldn't put a 1,000+% increase, because number one,
3,000 plus. Sorry,
I didn't want to over-exaggerate too much, but yeah, obviously, that's going to be glaring. What does that really mean? And as part of the Novo Nordisk journey, and again, this is part of our partnership with our brand colleagues who believe if you have an opt-in and you want to say something, you should send it to every opt-in you have. And we've had to curate that list in advance of the CDP to really work with them and help them understand that hey, the world has changed. There are other channels available for our customers to interact with. So they might have raised their hand for a Novo Nordisk communication, but if they haven't opened one in 6 months, 12 months, doesn't make sense to send it to them, not to mention the implications of how we show up in inbox deliverability rates and how we get potentially flagged as spam, which, they didn't even believe us to a certain degree, and I can see some head nods from my Novo colleagues where that was a big part of it. So we had curated that list to get better at, who are the active engagers, who should we be sending to, just to improve our average open rate, not even getting into the click-to-open rate. By using this is where we saw a major jump in that click-to-open rate and really driving that engagement. And educating the marketers who, I think coming from how we used to do, like, well, put everything in the email, so whatever they want, it's in there. To like, no, that is, most of them are opening on their mobile anyway. It's not the right way to do it. Give them what they want when they need it, and if it's engaging, they will click through to get to that next engagement, to give us more data, to orchestrate a better overall engagement, and that's why you see, some of the big jumps from, and as Dipin Patel, who actually is the brainchild behind the whole CDP, but made me be the presenter today while he's home, he's like, this is our new baseline. This is a good achievement for where we are, but this is really our new baseline. Where we go from here is what we need to start. How do we get from 33 to 50%? How do we get from 50 to 60 to keep, again, that flywheel approach of learning, optimizing, tweaking, and getting better and better is where we're at. So that is a great number for where we were, but it's really just the beginning of where we want to go.
Great. And so if I could leave you, with one thing, and I think that it's embodied here in the way that Wes was talking about their approach, is that, when we're creating these people-based experiences and we're rebuilding our infrastructure from the inside to enable that, it really, really helps to be clear-eyed about how what we're creating is going to help our end user and our end customer achieve their goals, and how that's connected back to our organizational goals. And ultimately, winning looks like creating those better experiences that enable all of us to grow and also enable the better world that we live in. Personalization isn't going to be any good to us if it separates us further from each other, if it pushes us into our own silos. It's going to be of incredible value to us if it gets the right medicine in the hands of the right doctors, and if it helps us all get access to, a better world. And so, I love the opportunity to be able to do this kind of work, and through marketing technology, it's amazing.
And you'll save money. So my team reports to the CFO. So not only do we drive incremental revenue for the organization by getting better at this, we're creating efficiencies, saving from the old system where we're moving forward. We're creating better opportunities. We're creating things at scale and saving money for the organization, as well as driving incremental revenue. Which, again, we are patient-centric, but we are a business, and that is incredibly important. And I imagine for many of my colleagues in the room, those are questions you're going to get as you embark on a journey like this. On, yeah, that sounds good, but what's the whole business case for it? What are we looking at, and what can we expect? So I believe, and to echo, what Evan said, absolutely, as an organization, we want to be creating those better customer experiences so that we create more of an identity with our customers. And that's a big goal of our next 100 years, is not to just talk about our brands, but talk about who we are as a company and leverage the technology to improve that experience. Because again, as I stated, our customers are expecting it. Your customers are expecting it. And if we don't deliver, they will find someone who does. So we have a good amount of time for questions. Hopefully there are some. If you don't have one, make one up, because we do have about 20 minutes, I think, left, which is nice and efficient for end of day, but more than happy to answer any questions from the audience.